Hey now, how is everybody doing? Welcome to Red Alert Diaries with Tanya E. Hood. I am Tanya E. Hood, a wife, a mother, and an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, it simply means I've worn a lot of different hats in my life that have helped me develop a full range of strategies and actionable steps that I've used to help my clients make a strategic impact, both personally and professionally, to have better than what life has been giving them. Red Alert Diaries is based on the life lessons from my premier book, Red Alert. It's He the One, the pocket guide to finding the love of your life. And if you read my book, you already know that I got married at 21, and after 11 years of marriage, I found myself going through a divorce, having to raise my 2 sons alone. To reset my life and survive my divorce, I took the time I needed to get to know me better, which opened me up to new love again. So now, I'm in a new marriage to the love of my life and my best friend, which just proves there is life after divorce. On this podcast, we have conversations that's real talk, marriage, divorce, money, and legacy. And I want you to join me on the journey. Call 240-532-2227. That's 240-532-2227. I want this podcast to challenge your thoughts and inspire you to grow, so together we can operate in excellence. I want to have a conversation about this past weekend, coming off the heels of Juneteenth and Father's Day. Both of those dates are extremely special. Juneteenth, now being a national holiday, gives others the opportunity to get to see some of the celebrations that Black people have been experiencing for years and learn more about what took place. Often we don't pay enough attention to the fact that there are laws that are passed in this country, and the insight from those laws that are supposed to be a protective factor or support for a group of people, they don't get informed. So someone has to gain insight about what's taking place so you can pass on the knowledge. Because those slaves that were in Texas were still enslaved for several years, even after a law was passed that gave them their freedom. That is still a scar in this country that is still having an adverse impact so many years later, because we don't often take enough time to know what happened in our history. And America's history is the history of all those that are in it. This is the melting pot for so many different races. But for the Black community, that 400-year mark that built this country still has so much stigmatism associated with it that we're living out in this day and age with police brutality, in this day and age with still some moments where a Black woman like me with an electrical engineering degree has had to still show up in an environment and prove that I am intelligent enough to be a part of the conversation and prove that I can still have a seat at the table and add value. I am grateful that my grandmother gave me the insight to know that I stand on the shoulders of those that have gone before me, the perseverance that it takes to continue to press through and fight. Because even after slavery ended, this country still tried to cause an oppression on the Black folks in this country. We don't pay attention to all the various elements of Jim Crow or redlining, and now in some environments with policing elements that's beginning to get cleaned up. And I'm grateful that we are working on clearing that up. But it does take having holidays like this to spotlight some things. Black History Month is not enough time to give people insight about the contributions that Black people have made in this country and abroad. And now Juneteenth can be a holiday that can expand the knowledge about what has taken place since slavery and how much further we still have to go. It took too long to let this be a national holiday, and for it to fall this year on Father's Day adds another impact to some of the elements that slavery had on the Black community. You see, a lot of us in the Black community are disenfranchised because fathers are not in the home. As we celebrated Father's Day, we in the Black community expand that date. We don't celebrate just the fathers that give birth. We celebrate those fathers that stood in the gap. And I'm grateful for those that stood in the gap for me because I am a daddyless daughter. I didn't know my father, but I'm thankful for the men that stood up in my community, the men at church that stood in the gap to make certain that I still had what I needed as a young woman, because both parents are needed. There's an element that mothers bring to help their children feel whole, to give them encouragement, to let them know that they can stand and press through. But there's also an element that fathers give that we don't often pay enough attention to. There's a lot of fanfare that happens on Mother's Day, and being a mother, I do appreciate it. But I have also taken the time to celebrate my husband and the other fathers that are in my life, because it is an important time period to let them know that they are appreciated, because a father helps you feel protected. A father helps you feel encouraged. A father also gives you confidence. And for those that may not have a father figure in their home, like I did, I didn't have a father figure in the house, but my grandmother, who raised me, gave me insight that there are men that I can turn to get some knowledge, because there's some things that only a man can share. The male point of view on some elements of life can give you the insight that you need. Like I was encouraged by a family that does not share my bloodline. And I am so grateful to the Fogels that have embraced me. You see, I'm what they call a village baby. In the time that I grew up in Washington, D.C., I was surrounded by my community that stood in the gap to make certain that I had what I need, so I can have the confidence to move through the adversity that I would face in my life. And it has not been an easy journey. But I remember the lessons that I received as I sat at my godparents' feet. See, one of my godfathers was a council member. And what I learned from Harry Thomas Jr. was that you may have to continue to fight one battle more than one time to get the victory that you decide that you need, as he continued to run to be the council member for Ward 5. I was really appreciative and glad that I could be a part of the lessons that he taught, the insight that he brought, and the knowledge as a father that he gave me, along with so many others. And for those of you from the Washington, D.C. area, being a part of the environment with Mayor Marion Barry. Now, granted, I know men are flawed. They have their issues. But there were lessons and insight that I learned going to the council member building, being able to participate in some of the neighborhood community events. My grandmother ensured that I had the opportunity to be mindful that in this country, we still have to stand and be a support system for each other. And so in America, where there are 329 million people, the Black community only makes up 14%. But the Black community still makes up over 35% of the prison population. And prisons in the United States are often built based off of the test skills and test-taking elements of a child that's in third grade. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of the preschool to prison pipeline. It's a real thing. Now, I know that a lot of people are like, test scores shouldn't be used for that measure. But measures are pulled from a lot of different directions that were not their original cause. It is believed that if a child, a Black child specifically, by the time he reaches third grade, does not have enough insight to pass a test to whatever the average that they discover or decide, then it is time to build a new prison, because by the time they get to high school, they'll either drop out, fail out, or be so disenfranchised with how America has positioned them that they end up doing something stupid, chaotic, that will cause them to go to jail. Part of that mentality is part of what we have to gain insight from Juneteenth as well. Because that elimination of Slavery just expanded into other elements like the Jim Crow law or the prison population. For a black man in this country at one point, if you were seen walking on the street after sundown, that was cause for you to go to prison. If you were carrying a pig or a chicken after a certain point in this country, on a given day after a certain time, you were sent to prison. Those prisons became the South's way of still getting the free labor that they once had in the United States that this country was built off of, on the backs of black people. And unfortunately, locking up fathers and separating them is something that is still taking place. We as a country have got to do better. We as a country have got to do different. And looking at Juneteenth falling on Father's Day gives us a clear perspective that we have to be sure to include the two, because fathers have to be present in their homes. I don't know the solution that would need to take place to get fathers back into the homes, but I do know that there will have to be a conditioning in this country to know that when you see a beautiful brown face like mine, don't automatically assume that there's danger. Don't automatically assume that they can't be welcome. Don't automatically assume that they should not be present. Because in this day and age, in 2022, unfortunately, there are still too many black people that are being called by their neighbors that don't look like them and having the police show up on their front yard, making them believe that they should not be present. There is no reason why we still have to have people calling the police for needless moments. I understand wanting to be safe, but it should not put automatic fear in your heart when you see a black or brown face. So let this holiday and this Father's Day be one more point that we start making some impactful changes in a household. And if you are a person that is around someone that was like me, a daddyless daughter, stand in the gap. I'm grateful that I have uncles that have stood in the gap for me that have no blood of mine. See, being a village baby, as the neighborhood raised me with the Fogel family, and I mention them because this family became lifelong friends that invited me on my birthday to celebrate with them. Their family traditions became a part of my family traditions. And the love that I have felt has impacted me and my children beyond measure. Because what I've learned from them is an element that a lot of people are still searching for. You see, my grandmother told me, and this is something that I'm hoping that you can have poured into you as well. When God, in all of his love, decided to pour out his deity into the body of Jesus to walk this earth, he gave us some examples of what it meant to stand in the gap, because he stood in the gap for us. And the Bible says that if you do not have mothers or fathers or sisters or brothers, when you become a child of the kingdom, I will provide them for you. And I am a living embodiment that that is a true statement, because I've celebrated birthdays with people that don't share my blood. I've celebrated love with people that don't share my skin tone. I have shared the family dynamic of someone filling in the gap as an uncle, a father, a brother, or a cousin. And I learned that that was possible because I was given that insight by God himself and the example from Jesus living. So for those of you that are looking to see how can I, as a daddyless daughter or a fatherless son, can have this impact, know that it is available to you. And if you choose to believe in the God I serve, you don't have to. But if you choose to, you will get the opportunity to have a family embrace you like I have had a family embrace me. I have a grandfather, doesn't share my blood, but I love him just the same, and he has let me know I have uncles that don't share my blood, but they love me just the same. I have cousins that will call me cousin in the middle of the street, but they don't share my blood and they love me just the same. And so for today, before I start crying all over my podcast, if you don't remember anything else I've shared, here's the one thing I want you to know. Fathers are an essential part of growth, development, love, perseverance, and guidance for children. And if you are not a part of that environment where you can reach out to your children, because there are some fathers that can't get to their kids, share your love with someone else. There are some individuals that don't have children. Become that present person for someone else so that at the end of the day, there won't be a need for a daddyless daughter to fill the hole, because I didn't often have to fill the hole of a father not being present because the men in my community stood up. And if you're on Clubhouse, we can continue this conversation in the Red Alert Diaries room at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I encourage you to join me there. In the meantime, this is Tanya E. Hood, walking in my purpose, and I want you to do the same.